Alright, this is the start of Unit 2. We're going to talk about linear functions, and today we're going to focus on this equation, slope-intercept form. So we have two parts. We have m, which is the slope, and b, which is the y-intercept value. So the slope talks about how quickly the changes in the coordinates, and the y-intercept talks about the point that touches the y-axis. So they give us four graphs, they don't give us a grid, and the idea is this. With this first one, you look at the two values, the slope, which is negative 2/3, and the y-intercept, which is 3, and you're trying to figure out which of those four lines would have those characteristics. So you could take the graphing calculator and graph each one and kind of narrow it down from there. Or if you look at first the y-intercept, which is 3, you want to look at the y-axis, and 3 would be above where the x-axis is. And then you have a slope which is negative 2/3. And if it's negative, that means the slope's going to go down. So the one line that has a slope that goes down and a y-intercept that is positive is line number 3. So then I would put the number 3 there. Now you can finish, right now you can pause the video, finish these other three based on the description we just talked about. Now for exercise 2, what we're going to do is we're going to, based on the directions that I read, it says graph the equation. So we're going to graph this, and then they want us to identify the slope and y-intercept. Well, for this one, the slope is 3/2, and then the y-intercept is negative 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my calculator, I'm going to turn it on and go to y equals, and I'm going to type in that equation, which is 3/2, 3 divided by 2, x, minus 3, and then hit second and graph. Now you can also, which I will recommend for the regents, you go to mode and go to graph table, G-T. That will give us a picture of the graph and the table at the same time. Now, I'm going to start at 0, -3. You can see that cursor's blinking 3 down. And then I'm going to start looking for points that contain two whole numbers. So like 2, 0. We also have 4, 3, which is 4 to the right, 3 up. And then we have 6, 6, which would be 6 to the right, 6 up. You can always go in the other direction, but I know the last point, based on the pattern, is going to be here. Then I'll draw the line. Make sure to try to touch every single point, make it as straight as possible. Now for exercise 3, it says write down 2 points and find the average rate of change, which we talked about in Unit 1. So I'll pick these 2 points. I'll pick 2, 0 and 0, -3. And again, you're going to subtract bottom minus top. So 0, 0 minus 2 would be -2. -3 minus 0 will be -3. And then you do y's divided by x's. This will be -3 divided by -2, which will reduce to our slope. So that average rate of change in slope do mean the same thing. Now, the last part we're going to look at in this first video, the notes, is I want you to go down to exercise 5, which is on the back of the bottom of the first page. And we're going to talk about how to get y by itself. So we need that slope-intercept form. And these equations have x and y grouped together. So I'm going to do A and C, and then I'm going to have you try B and D. And what you want to do, and it's pretty similar for each one, if you see an x term or a number next to the y, you want to move that first. So for part A, I'm going to add 3x to both sides. Now, you're going to notice that I'm not going to combine these together and get 18x, because they are not like terms. But I will have a positive 3x and a positive 15. And then from there, I can divide by the number next to the y value, which is 3. and I'm dividing everything by 3. So that ends up giving me y equals 1x plus 5. And they say identify the slope and the y-intercept. Well, the slope is 1, and the y-intercept equals 5. Now the last one we're going to look at is c, and I have an x, but I don't have a number in front, which means that's going to be a 1x. Let me rewrite that again. The smartboard is slightly off. So I'm going to subtract 1x on each side. So that I have negative 3y equals negative 1x plus 6. Then I'm going to divide each side by negative 3. And when I do that, I'm going to get a fraction for that slope. So if you do get and do tend to divide, in this case we have negative 1 divided by negative 3. You'd hit the enter button, and then you press math and go back to the fraction option. So this one is going to be y equals 1/3 x. And then we got 6 divided by negative 3, which would be negative 2. So this is the equation for A. This is the equation for C. The slope is for this one is 1/3, and the y-intercept is negative 2. Okay. So from there you can try B and D, and please ask any questions you may have as you kind of come across it, and make sure you get B and D checked from me.